set, Betsy?
We are.
Terrific. I don't take any more time from our speaker today, so let's get to it here. Thank you all so much for coming. I was so appreciative of getting an audience here on, especially on Monday, on any day of the week. At any time, it seems we're taking so much time out of schedules and a somewhat dreary-ish day. It's good to have you all here, and I think you're going to find the talk today particularly of use to all of us as we're diving into our second semester of the academic year. My name is Tom Garza. I'm the director of the Texas Language Center and a professor in the Department of Spanish, Slavic and Eurasian Studies. You can see it is Monday for me as well. I've already done 2 classes, people. I've taught 600 people today. I'm already there. I am so pleased to welcome you today, and pointing out just a couple of things before I introduce our speaker. In the blue sheet that you've got, there are some of the upcoming events we have, sponsorings or co-sponsorings with other units such as CORAL, our Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning, and a few departmental events as well. And I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of them quickly. On March 2nd, of course, this is the usual Explore UT open house for the university, and the Texas Language Center will be doing, we've done this now for the last 7 or 8 years, I think, a session called Global Voices, where our departments sponsor small groups of either singers, poetry readers, storytellers in the languages, done usually with translations available. And this year we're actually going open air, so we're going to be right on the main South Mall speaking to everyone out there, so please do come by, bring your students. East Mall, my bad. East Mall, better. Even better, it's a better venue. Martin Luther King will be watching us, so that's a good thing. Bring your students, bring your colleagues, and please do come join us. And the big one I'd like to point out is at the very bottom of the page, March 30th. This is going to be our first, hopefully, annual World Languages Day, a sort of Explore UT specific for languages at UT, looking at foreign languages, world languages that we teach. The 2 flagship programs we have here, one in Arabic, one in Portuguese. Our study abroad programs, our career services available in our languages, food demonstrations for fun as well. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of the serious and sublime mixed together, and hopefully something that we can bring both high school students from the area and our university students into before they register for classes for the next term, and really try to make them think about majoring or minoring in one of our world languages. So please keep this, and always do check our website, TLC, underneath liberal arts. There are almost always new events that get added in between these, and see what's coming up. Let me get to our main event here. That's the reason you're all here. I'm very delighted to introduce our speaker today. I'm always happy to introduce one of our extraordinarily successful and productive graduate students, and we've been focusing on the work that our graduate students are doing these last 2 semesters in the Language Matters series. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker because I've had the pleasure of getting to see not just the incredible work she does, but the incredible results she gets from that work. Rama Hamarneh is a PhD candidate in our program in comparative literature in Arabic, French, and English. She has a BA in comparative literature and Near Eastern languages and civilizations from UPenn, and a master's in comparative literature from here at the University of Texas, expected to receive her PhD. And I'm not going to change that. She will receive the PhD this year. Her dissertation, yes, I had to do that this year. Elizabeth would be furious. Her dissertation is entitled Unsettling Communities, Representations of Indigenous Identity and Mobility in Jordanian and Canadian Short Narratives. I love it. She's taught Arabic here at UT for 4 years, and that simply doesn't express the seriousness of this, because she has worked together with her husband Tom Letty in our program of the Arabic flagship program. So this is working with Arabists at the highest possible level of proficiency, and the 2 of them have contributed so much to the program that I have the privilege and honor to interim direct for 3 years here. Her work focuses in particular in the classroom on emphasizing communicative skills in the classroom, and to that end, the title today of her presentation is Culture of Close Listening Exercises as a Facilitator for Teaching Phrases and Idioms in the Language Classroom. Please help me welcome Rama Hamarneh.
So I'm pretty excited to talk
course you can. Yes, of course you
Okay.
can. Of course you
So I'm excited to talk to you all about close listening today, but before we get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about teaching Arabic so you kind of know the framework that I'm coming from, and then we'll kind of get into the exercises that we're doing. So in most places that are not UT, only the written register of Arabic is taught. So that's kind of like if you were taught to speak and listen and do everything the same way that you write essays. That's not really helpful when you go out and talk to people. And so that kind of leaves students in this situation where they get to the Arab world, they try and talk to people, and they can't. But UT is really unique in that we're one of the few schools that does teach dialect alongside Modern Standard Arabic, or Fusha, which is that written register. But even so, our emphasis on listening is still pretty general. You do a listening activity and you want to know what happened. Like, generally, what were they saying? There's no emphasis specifically on kind of phrases, on anything like that. And so this is sort of a missed opportunity, especially at the lower levels, where we only have kind of a limited number of resources that students can interact with. And so we don't really use this opportunity, and what I'm trying to do is to use these videos to teach close listening and to use close listening as a way to teach cultural phrases, idioms, and complex morphological and phonological rules at an earlier stage, rather than doing what a lot of other places do, which is waiting until someone has taken 3 years of the language and then kind of saying, oh wait, this is actually how people talk, let's learn that over everything you've already learned. So my goal with these activities is to make that part of a foundational knowledge of Arabic and something that they carry with them from the beginning. And this also allows for an inductive approach, so it's not just a teacher like sitting there kind of telling students, okay, this is what happens, this is what you should change, this is new words. It's allowing the students to discover these rules, these changes on their own, which really benefits them as they continue. So, how do we do this? So the examples I'm going to share with you today, I'm actually just kind of going to walk you through an activity. I think that's kind of the best way to show how it's done. But they're from worksheets and materials I created for my own first-year Arabic class, and I developed them after watching similar shorter exercises as a TA for Dr. Kristen Brustad, who wrote our Arabic textbook and who I taught with a couple years ago here. So like I said, these videos that we use in the books are one of the few conversational listening sources that we have at the beginner level. So obviously when you're starting out in a language, you don't really have the knowledge to watch like a TV show just yet. And so these videos that we have are kind of the only thing that we have that's really mimicking natural conversation and not for children and for people who are kind of thinking at a college level. And so we really want to maximize what we can get from them through these drills. So the way the textbook is laid out is that in every unit there are at least 2 videos. One is just someone talking at the viewer. We have some great characters, they have a nice story, but that's really just someone standing there saying, I am a student, I live in New York, etc., etc. But then we have at the end of each lesson these really great conversations, and they're between 2 or more people, varying genders, and they're often about a subject that takes into consideration whatever vocab and grammar has been gone over in that chapter. And so, like I said, they're one of the last exercises in the lesson, and so I've kind of developed these worksheets to use them for a close listening exercise. And so this is kind of an add-on to what's already available within the textbook. So the students, in order to do this, work in pairs. We ask them to bring in a computer and headphones so that they can listen together. The key is to not let anyone be on their own computer, which is kind of challenging, and have them share headphones so that not everyone is kind of listening out loud at the same time. And another really important thing is to prepare them. I know that seems like probably not, super fun, but it's really important because this is so much on their own group work, that the students that are working together work at the same level, and also that they work at the same pace. That's almost more important than the same level, because you could have a really advanced student who works a little more slowly, and a really advanced student who works super quickly, and that's still going to create a problem if they're kind of working on their own. So you want to take that into account, and I find the best way to do that is to prepare them before you get into class, but if you're really good on the fly, you can just make them move. That's also great too. So I'm just going to kind of walk you a little bit through the activity, and then we'll sort of take a look at it. But the night before the students have the video, that's kind of going along with the whole flipped classroom approach that we like to do, but they interact with the video at night. You hope and pray that they watch it numerous times, but you have no control over that. And so they're also responsible for some general listening questions that are kind of in the book that they hand in for homework. And those questions usually ask, what are they talking about? Like, what did they say about the weather? That's kind of the video that we're going to look over. So they bring that into class, and that's kind of when we start doing the close listening. So students break into pairs, and they very briefly recount the answers to the questions they did for homework, and we go over that as a class. All of this is happening in Arabic. The activity I'm going to show you is for second semester Arabic class. It would be one of the first videos that they did. And so this is still a pretty beginner level, but we're still doing all of this in the target language. And so after we kind of have that conversation as a group, we start doing the close listening. So students work in their pairs, and they're given a handout, and I'll show you an example of that handout, but essentially it's just a transcript of the text with multiple fill-in-the-blanks. And then what they do is they work together to fill out the sheet in the dialect of their choice. We teach 2 dialects of Arabic, Syrian and Egyptian. I really like to give my students the opportunity to pick one, so I provide them with the sheet in both dialects and allow them to choose to continue with the dialect that they have been studying. And I work as an instructor to support them in both of those dialects. And so after the students kind of go through, which is the first time kind of slow, as the students continue with the exercise, they do really get quicker, and that's sort of a testament to the skills that they are gaining as they do this exercise. But the first time does take a little bit. And after they do that, we go through the fill-in-the-blank together. Students will read out loud the full sentences with the blanks filled in, and this allows them to activate their reading and speaking skills. As a class, we pause on these cultural phrases, idioms, and complex morphological and phonological rules, and we work together to define how and when they are used. So the students are really the ones who are providing that information. Like, hey, that looks like a word we know, but pronounced a little bit differently. Or, hey, we've seen this word before, but it's kind of in a different context here. Or, oh, there's that cultural phrase we were supposed to learn. So they really bring out that material. And that's kind of a really great thing to see rather than, me standing there lecturing them about it. So after we go over the video, and I think this is arguably the most important part of the drill, is that the students work in pairs or groups on prompted naturalistic conversations in similar situations, where they're encouraged to use the phrases that we discussed and went over. So essentially they have time to just sit and talk to each other, simulating the situation that was in the video. So the video we're going to take a look at is 2 women talking about a trip that one of them just took. So they would simulate a conversation in which they are talking about a trip that one of them just took. And so it's a really great opportunity. I do a lot of, every semester at the beginning of the semester, I meet one-on-one with all of my students, and all of them tell me that the thing they want the most practice with is speaking. So this is a way, not like a skit, it's not scripted, it's not supposed to be performed. It's just for them to practice talking and to mimic a situation they could actually encounter when they go to use Arabic in the real world. So the big question, why are we doing this? So obviously to highlight and find these phrases, idioms, and morphological and phonological rules so that they can do it themselves. It's, again, not me lecturing. Also for Arabic, and I'm going to just kind of assume for most other languages, it's really important for them to get this kind of interaction with the dialect. And to really get to work on it in this way. And it leads to a stronger understanding of linguistic structure, which often differs from standard Arabic and across dialects. So if they're working to identify these differences and these changes from standard Arabic to one dialect, that's going to give them the tools to be able to do that across multiple dialects. And Arabic, like other languages, has so many dialects. And that's something our students do have to deal with actively. They learn Egyptian and Syrian in the classroom, and most of them go to Morocco to study abroad. So that gives them the tools when they go to Morocco to kind of be able to handle the dialect there better than perhaps someone who had never encountered dialect before or hadn't done these kind of close listening exercises. And the conversation drill afterwards allows them to use what they've learned and encourage them to explore different contexts and purposes for cultural phrases, idioms, and these morphological and phonological rules. It really just gives them a chance to talk. A lot of other skills they can work on at home. You can read at home, you can write at home, you can listen at home, but you can't, you can talk to yourself, but that's not the same thing as a conversation. And so we really want to maximize the amount of class time we're using to give them that opportunity to have conversations, not skits, and making it sort of more natural conversation so that they are prepared for that. So what I want to do now is go through an example drill. So what we're going to do, it is from chapter 5 in Al-Kitab, it's drill 22, and what we're going to do is we're going to watch the video. I know that not everyone here speaks Arabic, and if you do, I don't know that you are super excited about watching this video for like the 100th time if you've taught first year a couple of times. But we're going to watch the video, I'll give you some context, and then we're going to kind of go through the activity so you can sort of see how I've envisioned it. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of look at what the students would do at home. So like I said, hopefully they watch this video a lot of times. I can't promise that, but that's what I hope. This is what the questions look like in the book. As you can see, we've got purple and green. The purple is the Syrian dialect question, so that's kind of what we're concentrating on. So the questions are pretty general, like I said. So the first is, why does one woman say, Alhamdulillah salama? So that's kind of a phrase of kind of welcoming someone back. So why does she say that? And then again, how does she describe the place? Give as many details as you can. So again, pretty general questions, what's going on in the video, what's happening. Compare the weather in both places. The Arabic that's there just says, how was the weather? Kif kanat tas. So again, general kind of stuff that they're talking about in the video. And then at the fourth question, it kind of leads into the close listening drill. So how does this conversation end? What strategies do you hear for ending conversations politely? So again, you're bringing it back to the cultural phrases that it wants them to kind of bring out from the listening. And so what I want to do is actually watch the video together. It's only a minute and a half, so it shouldn't be too long. And so what's going on in this video is we have two women. One of them just got back from a trip to Paris, and they're running into each other in the hallway, and they're talking about the trip to Paris. She's telling her all the things she loved in Paris, and then they're talking about the weather, both in Paris and back home in Syria.
الله يسلمك. كيف كانت باريس؟ حلوة كتير كتير، يعني فعلا هي أحلى مدينة بالدنيا. والله؟ إيه والله، الناس، الشوارع، الزحمة، الموسيقى، المولات، الأكل الطيب، الشباب الحلوين. يا سلام، يعني صار لازم نسافر على باريس؟ إيه والله، لازم تروحي تشوفي هالمدينة الحلوة. وكيف كان الطقس؟ إن شاء الله ما كان برد، يعني كان في شوية برد وشتاء وثلج. كان في يوم واحد بس درجة الحرارة 0 وكان في شوية ثلج. يا الله شو بحب الثلج. وكيف كان الطقس هون؟ والله نحن كان عنا الطقس صيف، كل يوم شمس وشو. إيه أحسن من البرد والثلج. طيب أنا هلأ لازم أروح، بس بدي أسمع أخبار أكثر عن سفرتك. أكيد لازم نحكي أكثر. شوفك بخير. طيب حبيبتي، الله معك.
Okay, so you can see from the video that it's, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with the mouse. Okay, so you can see from the video that it's a little bit of a quicker pace. It's actually simulating a real-life conversation. It's not, I think a lot of times the only kind of sources we can find at this level are like children's materials. Those don't work a lot in Arabic for a lot of reasons. Mostly they're in the standard that written register of Arabic, but also they're usually really slow and they're dealing with children's things. So, 18-year-olds and over don't want to watch like a cartoon about a dog, or I don't know what kids watch, but that's not what they want to interact with. So this is a real life conversation that, as someone who speaks this language, very well could happen. I mean, they're literally just talking about their trip and the weather, and that's how they would do it. So it really is preparing them for what's going to come. So what we would do then is come into class and touch base on these questions. Make sure everybody's on the same page. We ask the students to do these questions for homework, but that homework isn't graded for did you get everything right. A lot of times students don't get everything right. It's graded for did you try. And the reason why we go over these questions in class first thing is to make sure that everybody's on the same page about the general content of the video before we start with the close listening. So after that, what we do is in those same pairs, they get out their computer and they work on a handout. The handout looks like this. So obviously Arabic is right to left, but that is the first page and that is the second page. This is the best I could do with Microsoft Word. This is kind of what the handout looks like, and as you can see, it's literally just a transcript of the video with blanks. And so what they're going to do is go through it in pairs and listen together. It is key to have them use the same computer. That way it's actually, they're working together and not just kind of, listening by themselves and then touching base. It really makes it an interactive activity. And like I said, the students do get a lot quicker as time goes on. This looks like a lot of work, and it is the first time, but they do get quicker. It's really important, while they're working, me and the TA would be kind of floating around, checking in with each group, seeing kind of what they're doing, how they're doing. It's really important at that phase to make sure you're paying attention to who gets how far. A lot of students aren't going to finish the whole worksheet. And that's totally fine. Some people just need a little bit more time. That's why you prepare them to make sure that it's not kind of an unequal situation. But what you want to do is make sure that you're paying attention to who's done and who's not, so that when we go over them as a class, you're not calling on, chances are that student who's probably not done is probably not going to volunteer. So you can volunteer them for a line you know that they've completed, because as you can see, there are a lot of lines, and if you have a class of 20, probably every student's going to read a line. So you want to make sure that you're kind of paying attention to who's at what pace so that you can account for that when you're having the class discussion. So what I've done here is actually, this is what it would look like filled out. What I would do is stand at the dot cam and fill it out as we go through. I didn't want to make you guys sit through that, so we have a completed transcript here. And what I've done is underline and highlight the things that I would want to pull out with my class as we went through this video. So I've kind of color-coded so we can go through it, but usually as we go through, the students would point stuff out. You usually don't have to do a lot of that. Usually they'll notice, hey, but why is that connected like that? Why is that pronounced that way? We saw that earlier. They'll ask the questions and it leads to a very natural segue. So kind of to explain my color coding here, the red underline is for cultural phrases. Some of these are older cultural phrases that they would have seen way earlier. Some of them are newer ones that are sort of supposed to be touched on in that chapter. Like the first line is the Alhamdulillah as-salame, which is the phrase that it asked, what does that phrase mean? So that's right there at the beginning and you go over that. And so that's kind of helping them see the context that we're using those cultural phrases in. The green. So there's two kinds of green. There's a circle green and there's an underline green. But those are for pronunciation and so phonological and morphological places here that we're pointing out. So the first two circles are the first three circles are points where a word, a preposition is shortened and attached to the word that comes after it, which is not how it would be written out. So that's something that's different. So the first one that we see at the top, the word would be ala as-salame, and we kind of contract it into as-salame. So that kind of contraction is super important. It's something that happens a lot in the Levantine dialect and the Syrian dialect, and so pointing it out from now makes it easier for them to continue to notice it as they keep learning. So the underlined greens are points where pronunciation changes, so a letter is pronounced in a different way. And so that's kind of, these are sort of the ones that are in here are ones they would have known for a while, but they still like to point them out, and it's always good to give an attaboy when they do. And so the blue underline is a really interesting one. It's actually a filler word. So the way that we say like in English, yani is one of the likes of Arabic. It actually means mean, like, so X means X. So like if I wanted to say like, sayyara yani car, if I was telling you what a word meant. But in this context, it's literally just a placeholder. So they know what the word means, and here we're kind of filling it in. Okay, what's it doing here? Because it's not saying that. So how is it being used? And it's good for them to introduce that into their language usage because people really like to use like still in Arabic, even while they'll say beautiful sentence in Arabic, but they'll have like in it in English. So showing them kind of this is what would be the natural use here. And then we have the purple, which I think is a super interesting one. So we have this word tayyib, which appears 3 times. The first time you see it as al-akl al-tayyib, which means like the good food. And that's what she liked about Paris. She liked the good food. But here we see it in a different context. Here it's used as kind of a subject changer. And this point here is where she's trying to get out of the conversation. So she's saying, okay, now I have to go. And so it's changing the use of the word. Rather than meaning good, it's like, all right, see ya, or like, all right, see you later. That's kind of what is being used as there. So just within this video, they can kind of see, okay, how am I changing how I use this? And then they can incorporate it into their own speech. So after that, what we would do is start that natural conversation. So here, they would be talking about a trip. The 2 of them, one of them would be the one who took the trip, the other one would be the person who stayed behind. And, sorry, that's not stayed behind, didn't go on the trip, probably wasn't supposed to go on the trip in the first place. They would just talk about it together. So like I said, this is not meant to be scripted. That's often the first reaction. They like get out their notebooks and they're like, okay, so I'm gonna say this and you're gonna say this. And you wanna make sure that does not happen. So I like to tell them, all you can have in front of you is that conversation to reference, but don't write anything. Just talk, and it's okay. This is kind of a space, and telling them that they're not going to perform it, I think really makes the stakes a lot lower and really makes them more capable of just kind of going for it. Because if they get something wrong, no one's going to see it except for their partner, and their partner is probably going to get something wrong too. So it's okay. So in this situation, encourage them to use what they discussed. This is something that Dr. Brustad liked to say that I have sort of taken and tell my students. It is not stealing to use a phrase from one of these videos. This is how someone would say something. Saying "see you later" in English is not trademarked. That's not like copyrighted. You can say that if you want. So it's okay to use these phrases from the video. And so kind of encouraging them not to like play act the video out, but to take phrases from it and that that's okay. They're supposed to be used in that context and in that way. And so this also allows them a space to mimic situations they would experience in the real world and practice speaking and listening as they would outside the classroom. This is for me like the most important point because the students really do ask for more speaking practice. And if you just leave it in a classroom atmosphere, there's only so much you can say. And to be honest, they're not going to say, how do I say this? Or I know the answer to that question. In the real world, they're going to want to go through interactions like this. So it really gives them that opportunity, and they really do get into it and take advantage of that time when they are given it. So as you continue to do these drills, the students really, you can really see how much they benefit from it and how quickly they start to get these kind of things and how quickly they're able to complete the drill. I mean, this one was pretty short. It would have been the first one of the semester. The one at the end of the semester is quite a lot longer. There are ones with multiple speakers, and it doesn't really matter whatever you throw at them. As they keep doing it, they do improve. And it really does allow them to continue to recognize these phrases and these kind of changes, which is really important, and also to use them. So after they see it in a video, the students, and they get to practice it, like the next day we come in and they'll start using them in their speech. So it's really great to kind of give them that opportunity to really digest the phrases and to kind of figure out how to use them. Also, like I said, especially with the sort of changes between standard Arabic and dialect, it really does give them tools that they need as they continue, because they're not only going to interact with people who speak Syrian or Egyptian Arabic for the rest of their life. Even at UT, most of the instructors are not from Syria or Egypt or speak those dialects. So it is really important for them to get those skills, those tools that they need in order to kind of be able to interact with other dialects and to notice, okay, this is something that changes in the dialect I learned in class, so maybe it's changing here. And they're able to recognize that and use that as kind of a foothold as they interact with new people. So, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping some of you have some questions for Rama or some comments on some of the things you've seen. Yes.
I have a question about the follow-up.
Yeah.
So they've been practicing with a partner kind of at the end. Then do they have to do it in front of the class? I mean, demonstrate? No, that's just it.
Yeah, what we do is, so me and the TA will walk around, and we've been very fortunate in our Arabic classes to have two bodies in the room at all times.
Right.
And I think that having them, I have had them when I actually first started doing the exercise, I did have them presented like a skit.
Yeah.
But I found that then they weren't encouraged to actually simulate natural conversation, and they did write it down, and I didn't blame them, because if you have to perform it, there's suddenly stakes on it. So we do go around and kind of interact with them, kind of watch them have those conversations, but they're just doing it on their own.
So could I follow up on that one?
Yeah.
Only because I'm curious, since you mentioned specifically, it's somewhat of a unique case that the Arabic program and now the Portuguese flagship also has this teacher-TA relationship, a kind of co-taught course. But what would the teacher, the instructors, actually be doing during that that post-viewing session where they're trying now to move it into their own active use of the phrases and all? How much input, correction, what do you do with them as you walk around the room?
So usually listen is the number one thing. Obviously,
Right.
You want to kind of see where they're going. I try really hard to kind of wait till there's a natural pause in the conversation before I interrupt, because again, if they're talking, even if it's all not coming out perfectly, I don't want to discourage that. Then usually what I like to do is kind of start with positive things they're doing, and usually there's a lot more of those, and then kind of point out specifically from what's going on in the video. So if I heard a cultural phrase and it wasn't quite used in the right context, I'll highlight that. If they're maybe pronouncing something that we just went over incorrectly, I'll go over that. But it's so dependent on the student, what level that student's at, and what they're kind of doing. There is definitely correction involved, but it's also just kind of listening to them and kind of monitoring the flow of conversation, and kind of going to each student and knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are, and the video that we just did, and kind of trying to highlight for them at that point in time what is most important of what they're saying that kind of needs to be addressed.
And it's mostly at the linguistic level that you're making these kind of mediations, I won't just say corrections, but mediations, or do you also give, like if they say somehow take the situation that they just saw, transport it and transpose it into a cultural setting that just wouldn't be done in the Arabic-speaking world? How much cultural correction do you give as well?
A lot. I think cultural correction, that's actually a huge part of our jobs that is not stressed as much as it should be.
Right.
That's one of the most important things, because I feel like if I'm not giving them as much cultural knowledge and correction as I can, at this stage I'm not preparing them for going to the Arab world. So if they're having this conversation inappropriately, they're like, we're at somewhere that's, I don't know where it would be inappropriate to have this conversation, but let's just say, then I would tell them this is not the right setting, let's try it somewhere else. So like you saw at the beginning of the video, the two women kissed each other. Kissing on the cheek is like an art form in the Arab world, and different places do different numbers of kisses on each cheek. So that's something, too, that we would have paused on and been like, hey, this is a cultural point, so Syria does it this way. Jordan does it differently. And in doing that, I always like to preface with where I'm coming from, so they know that the Arab world is a huge place, and I'm only a representative of a small part of it. But yeah, there is definitely cultural correction in there as well.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, so you said that you work with fillers and also greetings like see you later, and also now you said kiss on the cheek.
Yeah.
Can you give us like more examples on what else you...
What else do you concentrate on? So, I mean, generally, like looking at the video in terms of sort of interaction things, I do try and draw attention to things like body language and stuff like that. I think that's often left out in the language classroom. It is an important part of interaction, especially in a place that has such a like binary gender system as the Arab world. It's really important to make them aware of kind of what they're doing with their bodies and how they're interacting with people. But cultural phrases, things like see you later, introductions, there are a lot of phrases invoking God in Arabic that are used in different contexts, so teaching them when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, things like that. Filler words, changes in pronunciation, just kind of all those sort of quirks that kind of come up in a conversation. We try and go over as much of that as we can kind of when we're going through these drills and in general as well.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. It was so fascinating.
Thank you.
I love, particularly just a comment first and a question, how both the at-home activities and then the close listening lend itself to so much guided induction. The things that they're able to notice for themselves that I think helps so much. Could you tell us a little bit about the video? Was this part of your entire department content as an authentic material? Did you say, hey friends, let's make this together? How it was very authentic.
Yeah. It's actually from the textbook. So I didn't, but the website I was on was the website for our textbook.
Okay.
And so this is like a series of videos that are present in the textbook. I actually have though post this. Worked with Tom and with some other members of the teaching team. We have made our own or like recorded materials as well, because this is kind of all we have, and that's not enough. You know, you want more. So this is part of the book. They filmed this in Syria, like the creators of the book. So it's just a great resource to have, and that's where we got it from. But on top of it, we have worked a little bit as well to create our own resources, conversations. In different dialects too that they aren't exposed to through the book to kind of help.
Seems very authentic. I would have thought you made this.
Oh,
And you classify this as sort of like semi-authentic, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's scripted, but yet it's very natural. I mean, that's one of the things I love about Al-Kitab. It's the textbook really does do these little mini dialogues that you'd swear you were just hanging around and hearing this.
Very natural.
Yeah.
No, it's from the book, but it is very natural. It's a little slower probably than the average Arabic speaker would talk, but it's still a lot faster than most other resources at this level. Yeah.
Do you or the students ever use English when you're talking about the dialects, or is it always in Arabic?
So if it's about the content, usually it's in Arabic. The cultural stuff, I do sometimes use English. I think it's more important at that stage that they know the cultural thing than that they're getting the language practice. And I think that's a hard thing about especially teaching culture at those beginner levels, is that their linguistic level is not quite there to interact with the cultural material, but you still want to give it to them. I think that, a lot of students, kind of take their language requirement and kind of are on their way, and so they're not in the classroom for as long as they would be to completely be able to have that conversation in Arabic. And so for me, it's more important that they're getting the cultural knowledge. So at times like that, for the kisses, for example, they wouldn't know how to say kiss at this point. So we would kind of swerve into English for a little bit and then come. Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, Tom, please.
How do you handle the logistics of timing, in that you talk about how you split them up to work as pairs and how the pairs work at different paces? How do you handle that, given that you have X number of minutes for the classroom, and by the time you need to stop to do those conversations, some of them might not have finished, some of them might have finished 10 minutes ago. How do you address that?
So the first thing is that on the handout, you didn't see it here, but it does say at the bottom, start having your own conversation. So there's enough on the handout to make sure that every student, even if they finish early or late, has something to do. And that's the beauty of a handout, I think, and preparing them, is that even if they finish that activity, they have more time. A lot of times if there's a group that's really fast or they're native speakers of one of the dialects, I'll give them listening in the other dialect to kind of give them something else to kind of keep going, because I know they can handle it. It really is just about being willing to put enough time into the first time you go over it. And so the first time it takes a while and you sit for a little bit, and I usually block out one of those longer class periods. But it's kind of just if they don't finish, they don't finish, and they get to go over it with the class. A lot of them, if they don't complete the drill, do come to office hours to go over it. So they really want, because we kind of highlight that this is so important for communication, this is the kind of drill that they will seek office hours for, they will come to talk about, and they do really want to excel at. And so if they don't finish, I mean, that's okay. There are just some students who are not going to finish, and sometimes that's not to do with skill level, it's to do with their pacing. And so they go over it with the rest of the class, and then they come to office hours and talk about it.
Another question, Rama, if it's not inappropriate for the title you gave. I'm wondering, especially with the example you gave, when you're talking about this use of cultural idiom and we now have this set of ICCs, right? The intercultural communicative competence guidelines now, both at ACTFL and in the State Department. To what extent can you, at this early level, when you've got students still at the novice level, focusing in on those culturally loaded idioms, I'm using your own term here, phrases and idioms, right? For culture in the close listening part. How do you distinguish between what's simply for a first year, a novice plus novice high student, simply vocabulary, and what are these phrases that are, in a sense, carrying cultural import? Or is that something you just kind of do passively until they have enough competence that they can start really distinguishing between a vocab item and something that's really loaded?
That's a good question. So usually these are actually introduced to them separate from the vocab. So they are introduced to them as a cultural phrase. So there is kind of that divide for them already kind of present. And I think they do have the capacity at that level to know that. And I think it has to do with the time we spend on them. I mean, a cultural phrase is probably going to get more time than one vocab word.
Right.
And so I think they see the weight of it, and that's something in my class I really like to highlight, because something that a lot of my colleagues have told me when they went to the Arab world, even when they were at lower levels of Arabic, even if they didn't know dialect, if they used cultural phrases,
right,
that was a huge thing that made people more relaxed around them, that made them more able to have like a natural conversation and to get respect from native speakers, was using those cultural phrases. So I like to highlight them even at this level, because a student of Arabic, even if they've only done one semester and they go abroad and they're saying inshallah in the appropriate context, which means hopefully, then they're already a step ahead of a student who isn't learning that. So I do like to highlight it as a specific cultural phrase, and they are able to interact with it for that reason, because we highlight its importance.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Please go for it, Elizabeth. Please.
This is so great. Will this be on the Corel, the TLC website?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's amazing what you fit into 30, 45 minutes. Thank you. It's great.
Well, I hope you'll all help join me in thanking our wonderful presentation and presenter, Rama. Thank you so much for this. And we're going to look forward not only to hearing more from your exploits in teaching, but also being able to call you at the end of this year, Dr. Hamarneh. We're looking forward to it.
In Elizabeth's department, right?
Yes, yes.